Now, typically when I see an article from IGN, you know, I know it's going to be kind of bad. But this one I read and it was very interesting, and I want to read it to you all here too because it gives a really good insight into how the devs are developing Marvel Rivals. You might have already seen this, but I wanted to give at least my spin on it. First of all, I want to call out the fact that this was released on February 14th, aka Valentine's Day, and the person who wrote it was named Rebecca Valentine. Just wanted to point that out. Anyway, title of the article is Marvel Rivals devs say they're not trolling data miners, we'd rather spend our time developing the game. Marvel Rivals data miners think the developers are trolling them with a list of potential future characters in the game's code, but NetEase and Marvel Rivals say they have better things to do, like actually develop the game. Last month, data miners began sharing names of potential future heroes hidden in the code of Marvel Rivals, a few of whom seemed to be confirmed pretty quickly as real when the Fantastic Four were officially announced. However, as the list of data mined heroes grew, a different rumor began to circulate in the community. Some of the names were fake, planted there by the developers to mislead data miners. So something that actually happens within bigger companies is that they'll intentionally give pieces of information or some type of key that's like a specific key to certain other bits of information and such. I know this because I used to work in, you know, those Fortune 500 companies. And so this is like not unheard of. And I think a lot of people took this as sort of gospel because it seems to have what made sense. But again, as I read more, I'm like, actually, maybe not. Anyway, even now, there's disagreement in the community as to which, if any, of the data mine characters are really seriously being considered for the game. We recently had the opportunity to directly ask Marvel Rivals producer, I'm going to slaughter that name, Wei Kong Wu? I'm so sorry. And Marvel Rivals executive producer Danny Koo if they're secretly performing an elaborate troll. And while it sounds like there are no pranks being pulled here, we should still take all the names being found in the code with a grain of salt. Here's what Wu had to say. So firstly, we want to say that we didn't recommend anybody to make adjustments to the files of the games. So basically, hey, like, we can't officially endorse you data mining, so kind of stop that. Also, you can see that for each character's design, actually, we come through a very complicated process and we make a lot of concepts, trials, prototypes, developments, etc. So there could be some information left in the code, and it might mean that we have tried those directions and they may appear or may not appear in future plans. And whether or not they will appear in our future pipeline is highly depending on what kind of gameplay experience our players would expect in our game. So translating this, basically what this is saying is that they just kind of throw stuff at the wall and see what sticks, which is great. That's like one of the best ways to work, especially in like a multiplayer setting where they've got a lot of pieces that are having to work together with everything. It also means that they're probably looking for design space that isn't filled yet, which in my opinion is partially why the Human Torch leak that we saw, I feel like is more likely to be true, because the design space that the Human Torch took up was more unique for him specifically. We did a whole video on that. If you want to go check that out, let's keep going. Koo added, if I could have a 10-year plan, it'd be great. But the team experimented with a lot of play styles and heroes. It was like as if there was somebody doing scratch paperwork and then just left the notebook there, and someone, a data miner, decided to open it with no context. I pushed a little, asking him point blank if they were deliberately trolling people. Koo said, no, we would rather spend our time developing the actual game. So in other words, yeah, the stuff that we're seeing is just stuff that they've toyed around with. That doesn't mean that it's going to make it into the full game. In fact, they were probably saying, hey, this character has things that we like that we think would be good for the game. How does it actually play, right? So maybe there was a character, let's say, that had some type of anti-heal, just as an example, because of the triple support meta, and they messed around with it and went, yeah, maybe not. A lot of people have mentioned Jean Grey as one of the options from the X-Men to be added, as her kit is very unique and would potentially have a lot of unique ideas to interact with the rest of the cast. Maybe for some reason she didn't get added because of how powerful she was, or that she was maybe anti-fun, which is, again, much more healthy. And it's interesting that they decided to just, they don't care about people finding this stuff. They would rather just simply continue to push forward. The article continues, not much further here. In the same conversation, we also discussed how characters get chosen to be added into Marvel Rivals in the first place. The two told me that the team plans updates roughly a year in advance, and is committed to keeping its current pace of adding new characters every month and a half. For each update, NetEase first looks at what type of character and skill set is needed to balance out the rest of the game and add variety to the roster, and come up with a list of several possible additions. The way that Rivals has handled all of their hero designs up to this point is very much just simply basically dropping in a full unique kit and a full unique sort of atmosphere to a particular character, if that makes sense. Like, for example, Iron Man kind of just does his own thing. Then your best guess to counter him, of course, is the hit scan characters with ranged. You know, you've got your Punishers and your Black Widows and such, but it feels like the Punisher was going to be added anyway, and Iron Man just sort of made it in as well. I hope I'm making sense. Whereas somebody like Pharah in Overwatch compared to Soldier 76, like those two felt like they were intentionally picked to counter one another. I hope I'm making sense. The characters that we've seen thus far seem to be just simply designed with their own self in mind, and then after the fact designed around how the characters fit into the game, as opposed to other games which tend to try to design it from how everything else fits around this particular thing as opposed to vice versa. I hope I'm making sense. Anyway, let's keep going. Wu told me that part of NetEase's strategy for achieving game balance is to focus less on aggressively tweaking existing characters to be perfectly fine-tuned, and more on adding new characters and experiences to keep things fresh, fill gaps, support characters that are a bit weak with new team abilities, or counter characters that might be a little too strong. It's so unusual to see this. Like, if you've ever played a multiplayer game, like especially a live service multiplayer game, you know, not just a game that's just dropped and it's moved on, it seems like they're so aggressively focused on doing like exactly the percent amount of numbers in this particular setup with this particular environment, rather than just simply saying, let's just give the other side a bigger counter. We're playing rock, paper, scissors here, right? If the scissors has too much of a good counter against the rock, make the rock bigger rather than trying to fine-tune the exact scissors to paper ratio that is out there. Is that making sense? Let's keep rolling here. Once they have a list of possibilities, NetEase then takes these suggestions to Marvel Games and begin working up initial designs. From there, they look at what the community is currently excited about, as well as what's planned a year in advance in other Marvel divisions, such as a big film or comic arc that they can tie a character in with. That helps them come up with the final decision on who's going in. All this explains why there might be a lot of different heroes listed in the code. NetEase just has a lot of ideas it's tossing around all the time. I wanted to take an aside here. I know this isn't like the most edited video or whatnot, right? But just to praise this design philosophy, because I feel like it is so healthy. I think one of the things that kills long-term multiplayer games is trying to round out the edges so that it's just not exciting. Like everything just basically must stay in its lane. Nothing ever gets out of band or whatnot. No. The best games are the games that aren't perfectly balanced. They're the games that are perfectly imbalanced. Creating a perfectly balanced game is nigh impossible. Very few games have achieved it, and yes, those games tend to be very, very good and very, very successful, but it's also a lot harder to do and tends to have a long period of time where things just aren't fun, because you have your character that you really, really like, and then the next season it's nerfed, and then this thing is buffed, and then that thing's really good, and then that thing's nerfed, and the next season, yes, I'm talking about Destiny 2 again. But anyway, I really like this article. If you guys did too, of course, let me know. I'm considering doing some more outside of the band stuff and talking about some stuff that's just sort of around Rivals. So again, if this is all interesting to you, let me know, like, subscribe. Catch you guys in the next video. Bless your faces. Deuces.